Hi, this is another episode of Losing Faith, Finding Spirit. Today I want to talk about why we stay. This is going to be a little bit of a series here of reasons why people stay in toxic and abusive relationships. This is hopefully to help people kind of identify their own issues with why they are staying in a relationship, kind of work through maybe some ways to kind of break those patterns and those beliefs that are keeping you stuck in a abusive or toxic relationship. And this can be applied to romantic, familiar, work, friend, any kind of relationship. But mostly I'm going to be talking from mostly familiar and romantic relationships, because that's my biggest experience. The toxic people in my life have always been starting with the parents and then in my marriage that is over. So today I'm going to kick off this series with two things that are kind of very linked, very deeply linked to each other. One is love bombing, and the other is intensity. Reasons why we stay. Love bombing, intensity. I'm putting these together because love bombing in and of itself isn't always necessarily like the inherent evil. But it's when it's coupled with intensity that it makes it more obvious that it's a red flag. It's hard to identify love bombing. Let me tell you what love bombing is. In a nutshell, love bombing is when somebody does these grandiose acts of love. It is over-the-top romance, and sometimes it's not always over the top, but it's intense. And that's why I added intensity to this one, because it happens super fast in the relationship. The first 6 months of my dating relationship with my ex was the entire love bombing stage. The entire romantic expectations that I had for the 15, almost 20 years that we were together were based on those first 6 months of dating. I've had to take some real hard looks at this because I thought that the romance lasted a lot longer. I thought that things were different. But when I actually sit down and break it down, all of the huge acts of romance that I honestly fell in love with, it's one of the big reasons that I was like, this is the one. Look at all this romantic stuff that he does. That all sort of pretty much died very shortly after those first 6 months. Within the first year, they were mostly gone. But at that point, some of the other reasons why we stay were already deeply enrooted, and I'll talk about those in other episodes because I can really go into each one pretty in depth. It doesn't take much to get trauma bonded. It doesn't take much to get trapped and into systems. Love bombing is those giant acts of love, and it's really hard to identify in a relationship when you are being love bombed versus when it's just somebody showing affection, somebody being romantic. Romantic people exist. I am one such romantic person. I love romance. After those first 6 months, and absolutely after that first year, almost every romantic experience that my ex and I had were somehow organized by myself. Like, I had to do it. If I wanted flowers, I had to buy them for myself after the marriage. Like, it literally, like, we got married, and there was maybe a couple little romantic things on the honeymoon, and then that was it. That was it. And before that, there was, like, flowers all over my car, notes all over the place. He would come to my work and, like, do these, like, big expressions of love. That's also very common for narcissists and toxic people to show the love bombs, like do these big romantic expressions at your workplace or in front of people. because they get a rise out of that. Like that, it makes them look good to more than just you. It makes them look good to like all these people. So what's the difference between love bombing and just romance? Well, it's the intensity. And that's why I added that into this one. Intensity. The thing that got me so entangled in the relationship is the intensity of it. Those first 6 months were just insane. Like they were just intense. It was like we became each other's everything. There was no room for other people unless he was there. I wanted him with me all of the time. He put himself with me all of the time. I remember even at the time my mother being concerned that he was possessive. And I didn't see it that way at the time, because I felt, he let me go out with people. And he let me go out with people. Do you hear the way that I just said that? Let me, like allowed. That says everything. Even subconsciously on a whole nother level, I knew that this was like tied up so much in each other that it was a privilege that he was allowing me to see people that I liked without him. Obviously that's not good. Obviously that is possessive. I also had a very difficult relationship with my mother at that time, so a lot of the red flags also got overlooked because I was dealing with all the drama in the house with my family of origin and all of that, like dealing with that, because I was trying to pull myself out of the enmeshment that I had with my mother and just remove myself from the chaos that was my parents' issues. So that made it really hard to see what was going on romantically. And that was my escape. So of course I didn't want to be around my family. My family was where all of the pain was. My family was where I was struggling. My family is where I was being hurt the most. I wanted to get out. And this was a person that took me out of those situations. This was a person that made me forget all of this. This person made me feel loved. And those of us who have struggled with trauma in our childhood, and especially any kind of issues with your parents, that desperate need for love is the driving force of literally everything we do and every relationship we have. And I felt loved. I felt intensely loved. That's what intensity. The love bombs, the romantic expressions, and then the phone calls. It was like we could not spend more than a minute away from each other. And even if I went, like if I was in class, I was like college when we dated, if I was in classes, I'd come back to my car and there would be a note on my car or in my car or somewhere. You know what I mean? Like notes would be in my car, little love notes. And I think, that's sweet. It's sweet to get love notes. It makes you feel good. I'd go to work and he'd show up at my work and like send something over in front of everybody. And like everybody was like, oh, he's so romantic. Oh my gosh, I wish my husband would do that. Oh my goodness. I guarantee it never happened after that. It happened then and that was it. And we were together for almost 20 years. And that was the only time that ever happened. And that's just it. That's the intensity. It was so intense. And then when you get tied up, so then even when that intensity and even when the love bombing fades, because they do, by the time that all kind of goes away, you're already like tangled up in it. You're already tangled up in it because everything you do after the fact, that's the foundation of that romantic relationship. That's the foundation of it, is the love bombing and the intensity. And you're committed. I mean, I was the kind of person that's like, all right, I'm all or none. Like, so either we're going for this or we're breaking up. Like, what's going on? And by that time, other things, the trauma bonding started and other things started. And well, again, I'll cover that in a different episode. But, that love bombing catches you and it holds you. And then even when you're like, well, they're not being romantic anymore, there's an excuse for everything. We used to celebrate every month that we were dating. Like, we'd go on these nice dates and do something special on our month anniversary, as we called it. So like the day, so it was great. Like, I think that's a great thing to do regardless, because it makes you still have a dating life, right? But at some point before the 6 months, it was too much. He's like, oh no, we can't do this anymore. And a million reasons why, and I was like, well, the reasons weren't wrong, but I kind of like missed that. I missed those going out. Like, it was something to look forward to, something to plan, something that was guaranteed to do. But and at some point, even the other stuff, just like, oh, well, we're both in college. We don't have the money for this. You're going to have to start paying some for the dates because you want to see that movie. I can't afford to see that movie. So you have to split the bill or, pay for me sometimes. Like, we both have to pay. That kind of stuff. Oh, and I think within that first year, and this is the intensity, he opened a joint bank account. And I thought in my brain, because again, purity culture teaches you to get married right away. I'm not even kidding. Purity culture is all about, if you want to have sex, you got to get married. So you get married really fast. And I know so many couples, and so many divorced now, myself included, who did that, who like got married just because they were tired of being, single. They were tired of it. And the only way to experience sex and worldly stuff is to get married within the church. And so people would rush into marriages, or they had sex and got pregnant and had to rush into a marriage. Like, those were the kind of the extremes of a lot of people that I knew. And again, most of them are divorced now, because that's not the way to start a marriage. So that was my story too. I thought, based on the actions, the giant acts of love, the intensity, and then wanting to start a bank account, like joining funds, I thought for sure that meant we were like meant to be. Like, this is my soulmate. And he would say stuff like that too, of course. And that's the intensity I'm talking about. If somebody's trying to like move in with you, or like funnel funds together, open anything that's like super big, like buy stuff together, that's not okay. That's too intense. Within like a year of you knowing each other, I'm not talking even just dating, like knowing each other, that's a lot. That's too much. It's not okay. So intensity and love bombing are really hard to see through, because when you're in it, it's hard to see it. So the best thing that I've heard, I haven't started any other relationships yet since then, is to go slow it down. If somebody starts like calling you all of the time and you don't get a day apart, like you spend all your time together, you need to start taking some breaks. You need to start going out with your friends by yourself, not with them. You need to slow it down. And depending on how they react and act when you slow it down, that's going to tell you whether or not it's a problem. If it's a healthy relationship, they won't go that fast either. They'll be just as much aware. And if you're like, this is going too fast for me, this is too much, they'll be like, okay, no problem. Take your time. I like you. I like spending time with you. And whenever you're free, like, I've got other people too. That's a key. Do they have other people that they can spend their time with? Is it equal when you spend time apart? And my experience, he was allowed to do whatever he wanted the entire relationship, but everything I did had to be justified. I had to have like reasons for my everything. And there was all these micro criticisms, which I didn't, and that's the other thing, they don't happen right away. Again, the start of our relationship was the love bombing and the intensity. So when things started to fall apart and started to become aggressive and started to become like the conflict started, the fighting started, when all of that really started, it was like, who is this person? What happened to that guy that said all these great things? And in that intensity period, it was like we were one person. We shared everything. There was no secrets. There was nothing. There was no boundaries. Boundaries are super important. You don't have to share your soul with somebody when you just met them. Get to know them for a while, really get to know them. Spend some time just being friends, just figuring things out without any expectations. But there wasn't any boundaries, and it was just, we were just in each other's life. We were enmeshed. I mean, and of course, with that family background, again, it set me up for it. What was I supposed to do? So boundaries are important. You don't have to share everything, and the person should respect that. Your romantic partner should respect your boundaries, should be okay with you not sharing everything. You don't have to. Even when you're married, you don't have to share everything. I learned that from my therapist just very recently. And I was like, what do you mean I don't have to? She said, you don't have to. You don't have to tell him that. You don't have to tell him anything. You don't have to answer the calls. You don't have to respond to the emails. You can put it on mute. You can block. I'm like, but it's my husband. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Is it bothering you? Is it intrusive in your life? Block it. Get it out. You don't have to. And the other person should respect that. And if they're not respecting that, they're an issue. It's their issue. They are abusive. When they don't respect boundaries, that's basically a toxic person. Boundaries are incredibly important. So that's the advice, is that when you're going in love bombing and you're not sure, is this just romantic? Is it love bombing? Check the intensity of it and slow it down. Put a stop sign up. Slow it down. And set some boundaries. Now, if you already are in a relationship, or you're not, set boundaries ahead of time. Know the things that you're like, we're not going to touch these subjects. And what's nice about boundaries is they can always be redrawn. They can always be changed. But you should start with some really tight boundaries and, slowly let your things down as you get to know somebody. And you don't have to, even after you are with somebody and you are committed to them, you still don't have to share everything with them. You don't have to. You are your own independent person, and they should be their own independent person. And that is the sign of a real healthy relationship, is that you are two completely independent people who respect each other and, support each other. And not in a you give me this, I'll give you that support. That's not support. Support is they've got their thing, I've got mine. When they're done with their thing and they have some time, I'll spend that, and I have some time. When we both have this time, we want to spend that time together. And it's okay, all that stuff between us, all that stuff that we do on our own is fine. And there's a healthy respect, there's a comfort, a security in knowing that person's going to be there. And if they don't show up, you can reach out to them, and they'll let you know what's going on. That's what it is. That's what I want. I know for sure for me that the romantic partner I'm looking for in the future is a partner, is somebody that's on equal footing. We may not have the same things in common. We may not even have some of the same beliefs, but we respect each other, and we are independent of each other, but enjoy each other's company. And it's not all wrapped up and crazy and mixed up and enmeshed. So I hope that helps. Watch out for intensity in that love bombing stage. And it's always kind of early. It always happens in the early stages. And what makes that so attractive is because afterwards you're always looking for that. After that ends, after the love bomb and the intensity fades, you are looking for that again. You're looking for that person, and that person disappears. But then they do something, and it's called breadcrumbing, and it's where they give you just enough, like a little breadcrumb, and it reminds you of that person from the past. It reminds you of the love bombing. It reminds you of the romance and the intensity. And they give just enough. Maybe they do something just enough. They out of the 20 years, I could probably count on my fingers how many times he actually initiated some kind of romantic experience, but it wasn't never to the same intensity as it was in those first 6 months. never to the same romantic level, never to the same intimacy as it was. And by intimacy, I don't even mean sexual, because at the time I was all about the church and definitely all about saving my virginity until marriage. But the intimacy, we were like talked about everything. Again, that boundaryless thing, like no boundaries. So like that disappeared, because I would still open up and tell him everything, but he wouldn't reciprocate. Or he'd say just enough to make it feel, again, the breadcrumb, we'd have a conversation and it feels like he opened up, but when you look back on the conversation, it was all fluff and none of it was like actually real. You know, like, I'm having such a hard time at work, nobody understands how hard it is, but then never goes into too length of a detail of why that's hard. And if you think that, you know, oh yeah, well, this is why it's hard, or if maybe they come out of that saying, this is why it's hard and I'm going to do these things, those things never happen to fix it. So the breadcrumbs are those little tiny bits, little glimpses of the past, like, you know, tiny little romantic. It's not quite to the intensity that it was, but it's just enough to keep you thinking, oh, maybe he's come back around. Maybe it's back. Maybe it's okay. Oh, look, he did this sweet little thing, you know. Oh, that reminds me of when we were first together. And that keeps you hooked, because you keep looking for, when will that be the same? It's the hope that they'll be that person again. That hope keeps you stuck. That hope that they're going to change, or that they're going to be that person that you first met, that person that you fell in love with. Because trust me, you fell in love with that love bomb and the intensity. Fell in love with that stage. I did. And then when that person disappeared and became this whole other person that's ugly and you know, manipulative, and you just don't understand. It just throws your mind. You're like, I don't understand what's going on anymore. Where did that person go? Where did that very patient, calm person go? Where did that person who wanted to share the world with me go? Where'd that person who, like, I could tell anything to and they would tell me anything? Where'd that person go? Where'd the romance go? Where'd all the romance go? Like, it just, take a time, slow it down, set boundaries. That is my best advice for you. I'm sure there's more to it. Be sure, you know, look it up, Google it. If you have struggled with boundaries, you might be codependent. That's a whole nother thing. That, again, those systems that you grew up in could be creating a perfect, you know, ecosystem for this kind of abuse to happen. So you have to explore that inner child, really explore those relationships in your past, in your childhood, figure out your patterns, break the patterns, pay attention to how it's happening now, in the now. Don't look backwards. Look at the now, right now. What are they doing right now? What are they saying to you right now? What are you doing right now? Get into your body. Feel your feelings. It's all the stuff I can tell you to do. I wish you well. I hope this helps. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.